This is the state of the nation. Ilifa Mugwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Sally. This is the state of the nation. Ilifa Mugwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Sally. Welcome to the African Alumni Association. This is the state of the nation, and my name is Henry Sally. As always, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. It is a gloomy morning, spring morning in Toronto and in the US, I believe. In Europe, it is still spring. In Uganda, as always, it is sunny. But as you know, a senior citizen has passed on. You all know that the Right Honorable Jacobo Olanya has been pronounced dead. We have seen that tweet from the president of Uganda confirming that death. We would like to commiserate with the family and friends and, of course, colleagues that he has been working with at the Uganda Parliament. I would like to commiserate with you during this difficult time. Today's conversation is about monetary policy. It is about inflation. It's about how and why the prices of commodities in Uganda continue to rise at a very high speed. In the studio with me is none other than, of course, a few people that you already know, I believe. We have a new colleague joining us today. His name is Hirali Taylor Seguya. Some of you have encountered him in certain spaces. Hilary is a student at Harvard. He will be telling you about himself, of course, but he's famously known for having encountered the president of Ghana, challenging him to speak to his colleague in Uganda to encourage him to also love democracy and actually uphold the principles of democracy by letting power go, passing on the power to other people. Of course, I'll be showing one of his interaction with the president of Ghana, and then he will introduce himself. One of our other colleagues Susan Namata, who is in Uganda, is still having challenges with the internet. She will be joining us as soon as she's able to. Dr. Stella Nyaz will be joining us later in about an hour because time changed and I did not communicate that time had changed. And our time had changed, theirs hasn't changed. So that time, they're still counting on that time. So she's coming in an hour later. But Namata should be joining us anytime soon. Before we proceed, I want you guys to interact with Mr. Seguya. But before you interact with Mr. Seguya, remember this.
Please ask only one question, and please ensure that it is a short question-oriented question. I think without further ado, we'll begin on the right-hand side. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, His Excellency Nana, for that wonderful Pan-African speech. I'm very sure beyond doubt that our great ancestors, Kwame Nkrumah, Nelson Mandela Madiba, Milka Cabral, are very, positive about what you've talked about. My name is Seguya Hilary Innocent Taylor. I am a Ugandan and I'm doing my master's in international relations here at Harvard. I wish we could, exchange you for our Ugandan president, dictator General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who has been in power for 33 years. Because we are telling him enough is enough. He has to go.
Do you have a question?
Now to the question.
Yes. Please ask it quickly.
I'm going to be precise. As an advocate,
Tell us about that interaction before you introduce yourself. Mr. Seguya, welcome to the State of the Nation. The people are excited to hear from you. Please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much, my brother Henry, for this invitation to the State of the Nation. I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to be part of today's conversation. As Henry has told you, my name is Hilary Innocent Taylor Seguya. I am a youth leader. I am an activist. I am a global youth ambassador at an organization called Their World at School. So we fight for the right to education for children worldwide. I'm also a global, a concerned citizen of Uganda. So in most cases, I call myself a justice hunter. So you'll see me, fighting for justice everywhere I see injustice. So from racial, justice to, women's rights, to children's rights, to LGBTQ rights, to, all types of rights, animals' rights, climate justice. You will see my voice there because I believe that we have to live in a world where there is liberty, freedom, and justice for all. So currently based in Boston, USA, where I came to do my master's in international relations at Harvard. But I also hold a bachelor's degree in international business from Makerere University Business School. So I am glad to be part of today's conversation because it's talking about, the challenges that are concerning our country, Uganda. And we are all concerned because we cannot afford to look at Uganda collapsing before our eyes. We have to speak up and, fix the mess Despot Museveni has created for the last, 37 years he has been in power. That's why we are calling upon all young Turks mainly to make sure that we use our numbers and rise up to, and end tyranny in our country and, give liberty a chance to reign. So the video you've shared, of course, it was in April 2019 at Harvard. So we had this African Students Conference that we usually have every year on campus at the Kennedy School. And, the president of Ghana was a guest of honor. So he came and gave, this powerful African, Pan-African speech. And I so happened that I was given a chance, to ask him the question first. So I used the opportunity, the platform, to make sure that I talk about, the dystopia that we have in our country, Uganda, and call out Despot Museveni. So I told the president of Ghana, I wish we could exchange you for our Ugandan dictator who has been in power for over 3 decades. And of course, the president was shocked to, hear such rhetoric from Harvard University. But to me, I know that this is the only opportunity I can use to speak up for the voiceless Ugandans who have been oppressed, repressed, and suppressed by Despot Museveni. And the message was loud and clear because it reached to the junta in Uganda. So Despot Museveni got the message, and after like a week, he had to block me on Twitter because of what I said, because the video went viral, mainly in West Africa, and also reached our State House. So he had to block me on Twitter to, limit my freedom of speech. But I didn't take that slightly because I saw that as an assault on freedom of speech. So after 2 months, I saw the government spokesperson of Pondo also blocking me. So it was becoming like a trend with the government officials. Then after the Assistant Inspector General of Police, Asani Kasinje, blocks me on Twitter still. So I said, no, this cannot go on as business as usual. As a concerned Ugandan who knows Article 29 of our Constitution that gives us, a freedom of speech, I have to do something. So that's why I was, forced to drag the three people, the president, the government spokesperson of police, the government spokesperson of Uganda, Ofano Pondo, and the Assistant Inspector General of Police, Asani Kasinje, to the High Court of Uganda to make sure that court compels them to unblock me on Twitter as a concerned citizen, because Ugandans in diaspora, we don't have access to our leaders. So when we come on digital spaces, they're using as public forums to disseminate information in their official capacity to us, the citizens, and to get feedback also from us. And in the end, they are blocking us simply because we have dissenting viewpoints. That was wrong. So I told the court, you know what? This is discrimination because they're treating me as a second-class citizen. I cannot look on when the junta is treating me as a second-class citizen. And given that, Article 28 of our Constitution, says that we have to be given a fair hearing. All those three government officials never gave me a fair hearing. So I wanted justice in the court. And I told court also that this is like political persecution. So they are silencing me. They want me to get muzzled simply because of my political beliefs. We should not be tolerated in this digital age, whereby we are seeing democracy coming online, but also tyrants like the despot Museveni is coming online to make sure that they limit our speech. So in the end, I didn't get justice. The judge, Andrew Bashaija, slapped me with a miscarriage of injustice. And I didn't take things lightly still, so I decided to drag them again to the East African Court of Justice. So very soon, I shall be hearing, the case about Hillary, me, and versus Despot Museveni, Asani Kasinje, and the government spokesperson of Pondo. Because for me, I cannot allow fear of speech to replace freedom of speech in Uganda. That will never happen. So we have to fight back as Ugandans to make sure that, of course, we protect our freedom of speech on these digital spaces. Because without freedom of speech, we cannot, enjoy the rest of the rights. That's why we believe that freedom of speech is the mother of all rights. So it will enable you, of course, to enjoy your civil and political rights, to talk about the right to education, talk about women's rights, talk about health rights. You need that freedom of thought. If the government takes it away, then you cannot enjoy the rest of the rights. That's why I'm fighting back, and I'm sure beyond doubt I will win this case, because we have already precedent in the United States, whereby in 2019, the First Amendment Institute at Columbia University, sued the former president of the U.S., Donald J. Trump, and the New York court, ruled that the president, by then Donald Trump, was illegally blocking followers on Twitter because he comes on this, Twitter handle, because Trump was also using the same case of Museveni, because Trump's handle was at Real Donald Trump. So he was, defending himself that that is different. It was a personal handle. But the court said that the moment you're in office and you're using your public handle to communicate public information in your official capacity, then it, ceases to be a private account. It becomes a public account. So it is the same thing with Despot Museveni, because his handle is at Kaguta Museveni. So if you look at the content of his tweets, he's talking about public officials, inviting these dignitaries, ambassadors, presidents, talking about national development plans, talking about the policies that he's implementing in his junta. So that content, makes it public and a public account. So he cannot run away from it. But because the judge, of course, was following directives, and he couldn't, rule in favor of me, he had to defend, the autocrat. But I believe that I'll get justice in the East African Court of Justice, since it's, a regional court and it's impartial, I believe. And if you look at also the East African Treaty for the it has, Article 6D and Article 7, subsection 2, that talks about operational, operational treaties, operational rights. So this is where we have things like accountability, transparency, gender equality, name it. So I was reminding the East African community that let's, not allow a member state of this regional bloc to violate the treaty for the establishment of this African community. So, I believe that they'll give me justice at the end of the day. If they don't, I'll see which other court I'll go to make sure that I fight for freedom of speech, because I believe that without freedom of speech, we shall not achieve what we want to see in the world. And we remind leaders that when you come on these digital spaces, you need to be tolerant, because any leader who is intolerant to diversity of opinion does not deserve to be in any public office. We also tell them that freedom of speech does not protect speech you like. It protects speech you don't like.
Speech. Yeah,
Yes.
speech.
So
Yeah,
that's the best thing about freedom of speech. It doesn't protect speech you like. It protects speech you don't like. So if Despot Museveni and his Twanyula dynasty believe that, as critics or dissidents of their junta, they cannot tolerate our, viewpoints, then they have nothing to do, but they have to just, become tolerant to whatever we say. That is how democracy works, because dissent is democracy.
Are you afraid that the East African court might ask you to go back to the Supreme Court of Uganda?
Well, I weighed options with my recognized agent, because by then I was in the US and I couldn't travel back to Uganda. So I used lawyer Malema Birizi to be my representative as my recognized agent in this case. And if you leave, if you get a ruling from the High Court, then they look at the next step in terms of hierarchy. So it was supposed to be the Court of Appeal. But I weighed options with my lawyer, and I couldn't, go back to the same judicial system, because for me, in the beginning, I wanted to expose, the rot in our judicial system. So the judge was on trial, and he failed this, trial. So I doubt that the court can tell me to go to the Supreme Court before even, going to the Court of Appeal. So I think the procedure is, if you fail to get a solution or remedy in the High Court, then you can go to the East African Court for reference.
Right.
And I believe because in the East African Court of Justice, like all the member states, the 6 member states bring one judge. So it's upon them to either protect freedom of speech in our regional bloc, or to also abuse it, because I believe that judges in Kenya, they mind a lot about freedom of speech and the rest of the rights, more so Tanzania, however much we have some autocratic policies. But I'm not sure about Rwanda, because Rwanda is unpredictable. But Rwanda and Uganda, they're unpredictable. But if I can get support from maybe Burundi, anyway, it's hard to tell, because our region, we have despots.
It is indeed complicated, especially when you think about examining. If we do examine how the implications of a case are decided in the East African Court, do you think there's an opportunity to respect the decisions of such a court within Uganda, let alone the East African jurisdiction?
Well, if the East African Court of Justice, passes, a ruling, then it's upon a member state to implement whatever ruling that we get. So if I get a ruling that is in my favor from the East African Court of Justice, then I'll take it back to Uganda, and I tell them, you know what, this is what the East African Court of Justice is saying. They are saying I was illegally and irrationally blocked on these digital spaces by Despot Museveni, Asani Kasinje, the Assistant Inspector General of Police, and Ofono Opondo, the government spokesperson. So it is compelling you to, tell Dictator Museveni to unblock me. So it will be upon the government of Uganda to either, respect whatever ruling I get from the East African Court of Justice, East African Court of Justice, or they disrespect it. Because if they abuse it, then it means that there is no importance as to why we're having this regional bloc or this regional East African community. So it's not about only regional, trade. They have also to go back to the other principles of democracy, because we cannot talk about trade without democracy or human rights.
Indeed, Mr. Hilary Segbia, thank you so much for that insight. We are going to talk about monetary policy today, inflation and all that stuff. Of course, this was a side talk because Mr. Hilary was introducing himself. I'm not sure if he has introduced himself. Have you introduced yourself?
Oh yes, I did. I said, like, I'm basically besides putting my academic shoes aside, I just call myself a human rights activist. So
yeah, there you go.
People call me a justice hunter because I fight for justice, liberty, and freedom for all people. So whether you're a child, whether you're an animal, whether you're a person with disabilities, whether you're a woman, whether you're a transgender, whether you're straight or gay, I fight for everything, including climate justice. So I'm in the world whereby I have to fight for liberty for all.
That is Hilary Segbia. And of course, if you do want to follow him, you look for Justice Hunter on Twitter, and then you can follow him, see what he's up to. He hasn't told us the fate of his counsel, Mr. Malema Bilizi, and how the case is going to transpire.
Oh, yes. I think you give me a minute, please. I talk about that because it's also very important to, show the world the dystopia that we have in our country, Uganda. Because as you know, Malema Bilizi is not only my, lawyer in this Twitter case against the autocrat Museveni, but is also a champion of rule of law. You've seen him fighting against this junta on very many issues. And if it wasn't Malema Bilizi, who went to Mbale in the Constitutional Court to remove or to stop that thing of MPs proposing to amend the Constitution and extend their term to 7 years. By this recent election of 2021, MPs would be in power for 7 years. But because of Malema Bilizi, the court ruled that it was wrong, so they have to go back to 5 years. And he has, of course, fought for many issues. If you look at the COVID-19, that pandemic lockdown that happened in 2020, the junta, of course, came up with ridiculous, endless lockdowns, and they were violating people's rights. And Mabilis was challenging them on very many issues. He has been fighting for the voiceless and very many times, and it takes courage, of course, to do the work of Mabilis. And right now, as we speak, it's over. It's almost a month when he is incarcerated illegally, because we know that this is a witch hunt because of the intolerant judge, Judge Sekana Musa, who believes that he is not above criticism. But we remind the courts and judges that you are not above criticism, just like politicians, including Despot Museveni. They are not above criticism. So Malema Bilizi had a simple case. He was reminding the judge to use reasoning and follow the Constitution, not his emotions in terms to come up with rulings. So the judge was, triggered, and I said, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to send you to the prison." So that was wrong, because he was telling the judge also, recuse yourself because you are the complainant. You cannot be the judge in the same case. So for the case of fairness, recuse yourself. You get another judge in this case. The judge did not listen because he was following emotions other than reasoning, and he sent him to court, but to prison. But we believe that very soon his legal team, that is headed by counsel Isaac Semakade and others, are doing everything possible to make sure that he gets out of jail and gets justice, because he does not deserve to be in prison for fighting for the truth. So he deserves to be a free man, not in jail.
Talking about policy, how they and how they interact with the populace of Uganda today. I wanted us, because I have kind of changed the way we interact on this platform. We want to be the platform that educates the society, not just fellow Ugandans, but every single person who interacts with this platform. So I am going to talk very closely about the policies that pertaining to the governorship, and who is a governor, Bank of Uganda, and do they become, how does one become a governor, Bank of Uganda? When should the president elect or appoint a new governor in case the last one decides to resign, or in the case of the late Tumusime Mutevili dies on the job. So, what are some of the what are some what are some of the policies? I'm going to talk about that policy. Of course, today we are talking about monetary policy, we are talking about economics, we are talking about inflation. So for those of you who are wondering, what are we talking about? We're supposed to talk about inflation. Of course, it's going to be inflation. This was a side talk. Mr. Sebuya had to give us some of the background of what he does, who who they interact with, and why it is important for us to know what's going on. But in regard to inflation and how that comes into play, this is just my contribution to society. I think it's very important for people in Uganda to learn about different policies. Of course, those of you who know what I interact with on a daily basis, you know that I'm a policy guy, a person who interacts with policies or policies. So therefore, it is my responsibility to talk about policies when I can. Uh, with that in mind, why don't we talk about policy? Why don't we talk about the monetary policy in Uganda, and what has been going on? Before that, of course, Section 1F of the Bank of Uganda Act, Cap 51, defines a governor, uh, which means that the governor of Bank of Uganda appointed under Section 27. But what is Section 27? Of course, Section 27 of the Bank of Uganda Act, Cap 51, provides that there shall be a governor who shall be a person of recognized financial or banking experience and shall be appointed by the president on the advice of the cabinet. It also says in part 2 that there shall be a deputy governor who shall be a person of recognized financial or banking experience and shall be appointed by the president acting on the advice of the cabinet. Of course, the governor and the deputy governor shall be appointed for a period of 5 years and shall be eligible for reappointment. Number 4, the governor and the deputy governor shall not, while holding the office of governor or deputy governor, occupy any other office or employment, whether remunerated or not. Number 5, it says that notwithstanding Section 4, the governor or deputy governor may A, become a trustee of any staff, pension, provident, or superannuation fund or scheme. 5B, with the approval of the minister of the Minister Act, as a member of any commission or committee appointed by the government to inquire into any matter affecting currency or banking or other matters. Part C, so 5 Part C, with the consent of the minister and the approval of the board, become a director, governor, or mentor of the board by whatever name called of any international bank or an international monetary authority to which the government shall have adhered or given support or approval. Part 6, the governor and the deputy governor shall be appointed on conditions specified in their letters of appointment. Part 7, the governor and deputy governor may resign his or all office by writing address to the minister, and the resignation shall take effect 1 month from the date of receipt of the letter of resignation by the minister. So that is just a simple policy on who becomes governor, who is a governor, when do they become governor, deputy governor. And the reason why we are talking about governor, and I think the reason why it is important for us to understand who becomes governor, why a governor should be there. Because a governor of a central bank is there to pretty much monitor policies, monetary policy within the country to ensure that there is stability, financial stability, right? So this monetary policy statement that you're seeing in this presentation here is as of April 2021. And it explains a little bit of some of the predictions that are happening right now in the country as we interrogate the issue of rising commodity prices, as we interrogate the issue of inflation. There are certain predictions that were done in April last year, talking about some of the thoughts that pertain to why certain commodities might be paid at a higher rate than they usually are. Of course, Uganda's inflation rate was, even though the target was 5%, it was put at 6.5%. At some point, it was at 7%, actually. So the 0.5 percentage point was put back by these people who manage our monetary policy in Uganda. There's a lot of information to read about this, but I think without wasting a lot of time, I'm going to invite Hilary to talk about that briefly. Before you speak about anything, I want to ask Susan to introduce herself, and then we shall engage into this later. So, Susan, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Yes, Henry.
Once again. This is your second time coming back. How are you?
Thank you.
Why are you
Thank
excited
you
to
so
speak
much.
about inflation? Why are you excited to speak about inflation? So first introduce yourself and then tell us why you think it is important for us to talk about these issues. Susan.
I'm great, Henry. Thank you so much. Hello, Taylor. Hello. You can't hear me?
We hear you.
Hello.
We hear you. We hear you.
Okay,
we hear you.
Good. Yes, I'm great. Thank you for hosting me again. My first time was a mess. You can attest to that. This time around, I'm going to be in control of my nerves. It was the nervousness that blew everything off. Nice meeting you, Hilary. I'm Susan Namata, an economist. Oh yeah, nice meeting you too. I'm Susan Namata, a director, Miley PLC. It's an economic think tank. Inflation is a great topic. We need to discuss it expoundly. We need to show people why it's happening, and also find solutions, how we can mitigate it. So I'm excited to talk about it. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. It's good that you're excited to talk about it. I wonder what Hillary thinks. So after interrogating some of the issues that you have interrogated, everyone is talking about rising prices in commodities in Uganda. Very many people are complaining about high prices for soap, for fuel, for certain foodstuffs, of course. But there are some people who have intimated now that there is a war in Ukraine, or the Russian aggression against Ukraine, that this is the reason why prices are going up. But like, when we look at the report, the monetary policy report or statement from April 2021, we see the predictions. These guys knew that things that these things were going to happen. Why is there some sort of change of mind now among certain politicians, among certain elites within Uganda that are claiming that this is probably caused by the war in Ukraine, even though it could be partly the cause for the rising commodity prices?
Yes, thank you, Henry. And you've given a good preamble about our recent monetary fiscal report that was released by Bank of Uganda for this last quarter. Now, we have to, of course, first of all, understand that inflation itself is a tax. So when the government, brings up inflation, that is a tax to the ordinary people, to the wananchi, on that most people don't know that this is another way a government is collecting taxes from people, mainly the poor. So Ugandans, that has to be very clear, that inflation is a tax. Now, of course, as you've noted in that report that you were reading from the central bank, it is now known that the inflation of Uganda is at 5%. Only that the bank, the staff of Bank of Uganda, they're projecting that the inflation rate of Uganda would not likely, surpass 7.5%. And they're saying that if it surpasses 7.5%, that's when the central bank will come in with, interest rates to make sure that to these commercial banks, and make sure that they stabilize the situation to protect, our currency from depreciating, so much against the US dollar. But going back to, your comparison, because now you're benchmarking it to the other factors. So as
they say it is currently at 6.5%. Their target is 5%. But I don't think they are there yet.
Yeah, okay, maybe with the recent report, but the report I read was saying 5%. But the most important thing that we have to know about inflation, that inflation is caused by both domestic economic factors and external economic and political factors. Right. So different schools of thoughts, of course, will be right. So when some people say that, of course, the crisis that is going on in Ukraine and Russia is partly responsible for what's happening in Uganda today, of course, they're also right. But we have to look at other factors also, because it's not only that crisis, because inflation has been there even before this crisis of Ukraine and Russia. So now we have to understand that what was the root cause of this inflation in Uganda. Has it just started or not? So if it has just started, or if it didn't start today, what were the policies this junta of Despot Museveni was putting in place to make sure that the situation becomes, stable? So as I was telling you at the beginning, that our economy is crashing before our eyes, and we cannot look on when Uganda is crashing. So we have to rise up and save the economy by saying enough is enough. So let's look at the domestic factors first before we go to the external factors, because for me, if you ask me what are the causes of inflation, I'll basically summarize it into three factors. I'll tell you that one, it is the expenditure of the government. Then two, I'll tell you that is the disruptions in the supply chain that we have globally. Then three, I would maybe put it on the central bank of Uganda, because it's also primarily responsible for the economic, fiscal, and monetary policies that have to make sure that everything is balancing up, mainly on terms of the balance of payment, which is not looking great because we see that we have deficits with our trade. But if I'm to begin with the main issue that is causing this, the disruptions in the supply chain, that is something that is so important that we have to analyze, that is causing these prices of commodities to skyrocket so fast. And it is sad that in Uganda, once prices go high, they never go back low. That is the system this junta of Museveni has created. It's a hyperinflation. So look at a bar of soap. It is costing as high as 10,000 Ugandan shillings. How can you explain that to Ugandans, mainly those who are in the poverty, below the poverty line? Because they're telling us that over 28% of Ugandans are below the poverty line. So how are these people going to survive without soap? Because without soap, it means that you're leaving them to have unhygienic, health conditions. Now, when it comes to people who are buying kerosene, because a liter of kerosene is also very expensive, it's over 3,000 Ugandan shillings. So how about Ugandans who are living in deep rural areas? Are they going to be able to buy kerosene? They cannot. A bunch of matoke right now is costing as high as 30,000 Ugandan shillings. So how is the wananchi in Kabarole, in Kabale, in Singiro, Ombali is going to be able to buy this bunch of matoke? It's going to be so hard. Look at the cost of beans. 1 kilogram is as high as 5,000. So for maize, of course, because Kenya blocked the export of maize from Uganda to Kenya, that's why we are lucky that maize is not as high as beans. So we have that gap. But now, going back to the issue of disruptions in supply chain, it goes back to the most powerful economic countries in the world. So you're going to look at USA, you're going to look at China, you're going to look at India, Germany. So most Ugandans are, importing things from China. So once China is locked up and they cannot produce the raw materials we need in our country, Uganda, then it means that they're going to block all that supply chain, because you may find that China is, let's say China is producing what item? I could say maybe China is producing a toothpick. And you say that now for China to produce this toothpick, they need timber from Congo. So if they cannot import timber from Congo to China because of the situation that is there, maybe because of the lockdown, the COVID-19 lockdown, then it means that that chain is going to be blocked, because they need these raw materials to supply chain to give it to Uganda and other consumers. Now, I can give you another example of maybe cars. Let's look at cars. If a company is manufacturing cars, it needs different raw materials, or outputs rather. So if I'm in China and I have maybe a manufacturing company, I'll need semiconductors, because today so well that semiconductors are nowhere to be seen. So the biggest suppliers of semiconductors, it's Taiwan and Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Yes, they don't have these semiconductors. So if China does not have them, then it means that they cannot go ahead by manufacturing new cars. So Ugandans are going to resort to buying all the cars. So what these businessmen do in Kampala is to make sure they hike the price of all the cars, because now all the cars on market, they're very expensive. So that is the challenge. Now, oil, of course we know oil. We don't have oil in Uganda. We don't manufacture, we don't produce oil at all, whether it's crude oil or what. We're just planning to start producing oil in the few coming years. But now the OPEC community that is in charge of oil, of course, they take advantage of these disruptions in the world, and they will of course control everything. Now they will put a shortage of oil by not supplying to other countries, because you see the war between China, Russia, and Ukraine. Countries are taking sides. So if you're pro Ukraine, of course, you're going to do sanctions to punish Putin. And if you're anti the West, then you'll be siding with Russia. So we have, a demand of oil, because in many countries, not only Uganda, we need this crude oil to produce plastics, to produce maybe to produce other raw materials. So if you look at companies like Bidco, they cannot produce enough sunflower crude oil because we don't have that investment that is enough to sustain the entire company. So you find that companies like Mukwano, they even resort to importing more crude oil from other countries to make sure that they supply more sunflower crude oil to their company and produce cooking oil to Ugandans. That's why you see cooking oil is very expensive today. So a half liter of cooking oil is as high as 5,000, just half a liter. So these things never happened years ago. Now we are wondering what's going on. But all this comes back because our government has failed to put policies that are going to cover these loopholes. So we have petroleum reserves in Jinja, but they are empty. If you go to those depots in Jinja, they are empty because the government has failed to prioritize these things. They have failed to plan for these things because it's not the first time we are facing inflation. So inflation was high in 2019, in 2020, when the pandemic just began. The rate of inflation in Uganda was at 3.0%. So they knew that the worst is coming. And now we had the pandemic for 2 years. So the pandemic has just ended, and we thought we were going back to normal, and things are getting worse because of the war in Ukraine and Russia. Now, we all know that China is getting another variant of COVID-19. So if China again blocks this supply chain, then it means the situation is going to get even worse. So the businessmen who are importing merchandise from China, they're going to run out of business. Eventually, they will shut down the businesses. Look at the people who are who are in the business of bread, or who need wheat to do bread, to do confectionaries like cakes, to do chapatis. So many Ugandans have been feeding on chapatis. But today, because the cost of this wheat is very expensive, because the biggest suppliers of wheat, Ukraine and Russia, they're having a crisis. We cannot, afford to buy bread, because bread now is as high as 5,000, 1 kilogram of bread. So how many Ugandans can afford that? Of course, it is the 1% that has been exploiting the resources of this country. So the 99% of Ugandans are going to suffer. Mainly Ugandans who are working on a hand to mouth. So they will be running out of businesses. And at the end of the day, that impacts our economy, because the government will be also losing out, because Ugandans will not be paying taxes. So it means that the revenues that Uganda Revenue Authority has been collecting from these small businesses are going to be also shrinking. Now, if revenues shrink, it means the government cannot function well, because the government needs taxes in order to function well. So what does that lead to? The junta will be now looking for alternatives. They will be running to other financial institutions like the World Bank, like the IMF, Exim Bank of China, the African Development Bank, and local banks like Stanbic Bank to give them money to make sure that they can, survive in this situation. No, these loans are going to be with high interest rates, because right now, of course, we know that our public debt has hit 74 trillion Ugandan shillings. That's about 20 billion US dollars. So it means that the debt very soon is becoming unsustainable, because if you look at our ratio, our GDP ratio, debt to GDP ratio, it is at 46.7%. So they are predicting that by the end of this financial year, it will surpass the threshold of 50%, and that is likely to turn our economy into our debt into unsustainable. So we shall be facing challenges, because that risks our national resources that we're giving as collateral for these expensive loans we're getting from financial institutions. And if you look at Stanbic Bank, well, I don't know why they're giving us expensive loans as high as 15%. That is so high. Yet institutions like IMF is giving us loans at a zero interest rate. So Ugandans have to be concerned about this. But our leaders have failed us. If you look at the parliament, they are not concerned. They are sleeping because they are yes men. So the parliament is full of inept legislators. Instead of them coming up with, acts that are going to protect consumers in Uganda, to make sure that they fight these monopolies in our market environment, they are silent. So now you're wondering who is going to save Ugandans from this situation? Of course, it is hard to answer. Who? So when I was talking about that issue of government expenditure, that they will run to loans, because it was my second point, they will get these loans, and because they want to provide these services to people. The way you saw in the lockdown, they went, IMF gave them 1 trillion Ugandan shillings in last year, because it approved a loan of 1 trillion Ugandan shillings. But you're giving this amount of money to a junta that does not even account for these resources. They're just using money to benefit themselves, and also to make sure this money goes to their offshore accounts. So it's not benefiting the wananchi on the ground. And this raises concerns that as Ugandans, are we going to keep silent as this regime is exploiting us or not? Now, the other issue, the third one I was talking about, is the issue of the central bank. That the central bank is procrastinating with coming up with interest rates to make sure that it stabilizes the situation. Because the longer you take, because I doubt if even these figures botched, or because I doubt for many occasions we've seen that the government just comes out with figures to show that the economy is doing well, because they know that we have this political question that we cannot have one person to take us forward when he has been in power for almost 4 decades. So now they have to come up with these appeasement figures to the international community, that yes, this dictator Museveni has been in power, but look, the economic figures show that it's doing well, but Ugandans don't feel the statistics in their pockets.
Yeah, they don't.
Ugandans want to make sure that their household income is increased, but they don't have money to spend. So it's going to create challenges. And if they take long, of course, I was talking about the balance of payment. So now with the balance of payment, we are having a deficit of exports. We're exporting less to countries like Kenya, or look at the South African community, even far away from to the south and to the north. We are not exporting enough. So it means that the revenue base is going to shrink. And if you look at how we are using this amount of money to clear the debt, majority of our revenue base is going to clear the debt. So over 60% in the last financial budget went towards clearing the debt. And they are telling us today in Uganda that for every 5 shillings that URA collects from us Ugandans, 4 shillings are going towards clearing the interest rates alone. They're not talking about the principal debt, but only the interest rate. So it means these debts are very expensive, and we cannot achieve to sustain going for such expensive loans. So Ugandans, our debt is expensive, because they say that it's going to take us 94 years to clear this debt of 74 trillion Ugandan shillings. And each Ugandan, as we speak right now, owes 1.5 million Ugandan shillings. So it's going to take like 3 to 4 generations to clear this debt. But we shall be clearing it if at all the government cuts its appetite of borrowing, which is not happening.
Which is not happening anytime soon.
Government is unrealistically and it's responsibly borrowing from these financial institutions. And last time, like 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with the IMF, and we are telling them, you guys get serious. You can put, tougher conditions on this money you're giving Despot Museveni with this junta. You cannot tell us you're financing the junta to curtail on our rights.
That's assuming that IMF. That's assuming that IMF does not have interests in Uganda. So that's another conversation to interrogate. But I'm gonna give the ladies some time to engage in this conversation as well. Welcome to the State of the Nation, Dr. Stella Nyanzi. We know that you're working hard to ensure that you educate Ugandans. Before I introduce you, I am going to play this clip to reintroduce yourself to the community. Welcome to the State of the Nation again.
Women shall no longer wait for timid men to fight for the liberation of Uganda. We pack missiles in our pens and grenades in our mouths and shoot our troops at the dictatorship.
Stella Nyanzi can finally relax. For years, the Ugandan activist and poet was politically persecuted in her homeland. Now she's found refuge in Germany through a Writers in Exile program run by Writers Association PEN.
What needs to be said to dictatorships can be said, and nobody will kill me. My body won't be beaten down, and that is what freedom means, that those of us who have voice and privilege can use these voices and privilege without being penalized for doing this, and this is important.
Nyanzi is a harsh critic of Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, who has ruled the East African country for 35 years.
Stop oppressing Ugandans, Yoweri Museveni, go!
Nyanzi was arrested and put on trial for the first time in 2017. She'd accused the president of breaking his election promise to provide free feminine hygiene products. In Uganda, girls and young women often can't afford hygiene products. They're then too ashamed to go to school and miss out on their education. After reneging on his promise, Nyanzi called the president a pair of buttocks and his wife the...
We are talking about soap, sugar, and all other commodities that are having very high prices. We haven't talked about sanitary pads. So maybe Dr. Stella will tell us about what is happening with sanitary pads, how much do they cost right now? But most importantly, how do you feel both mentally and morally? Dr. Stella, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Right. Thank you very much, Henry. I apologize to the audience and to the other panelists for coming late. I thought we were doing the usual 1 hour, and I didn't realize that in Canada, time had already changed. I apologize again for coming late, but I thought I would come in for the last 1 hour because Uganda is mourning. We cannot pretend anymore that Olanya didn't die. We're talking about money. And I think that the first hard-hitting point I want to make is think about the billions that were spent on transporting this man, one single man and maybe his carer, to whichever Western country to take care of him. And we knew he would eventually die. And so much money is going to be spent on bringing his body back, his dead body. So much money is going to be spent on a state funeral of one man, the speaker of a bloated parliament with over 500 people, and Ugandans are mourning. Okay, how do we even begin to talk about ngachitalo nyo, which is the respectable thing to do in my culture as a Muganda woman, as an African person? The state of economic plight and suffering of everyday Ugandans. I won't speak like Hillary. He speaks like an economist. I speak like a woman who has children, who has no husband paying for her, who has male relatives who are in prison, who looks at the filth and obscenity of transporting Olanya's dead body back to Parliament to have a state funeral for a whole week, perhaps more. Okay, that is the level of obscenity that our country has been reduced to, and we become night dancers and witches and witch doctors. We can no longer sing Gachitalo Nyo. We can no longer afford to mourn because there's a clear divide between those who have, the pro-NRM regime apologists, and those of us who don't have, which is the vast majority of Ugandans, many of us who are opposed to the oppression of Yoweri Museveni. So before you ask me about sanitary pads, let us talk a bit about the filth, the wealth, the corruption, the misappropriation, the theft, the graft that is happening in Uganda. Not this year alone, the past 4 decades. They call it 36 years, but 4 decades of theft. Okay? And so I come into the space quite bitter. We have economists and monetary scientists and projection specialists and people who model math, micro, macro, perspective and I don't know, those graphs that these people draw, very impressive, but they have been reduced to becoming dimwits brainless in Uganda. I think network was
No, it's okay. We hear you. We hear you.
Ompulira bannaye nswadde ate nga sibalaba Henry nga sibalaba ndaba black amwereere eyo.
There's a graphic that I put here.
Graphic
Hillary
will explain to us what that means. Susan too, because I understand Susan is an economist, right? I'm still grieving as a Ugandan that very many Ugandans on the side of life where I sit
right
can no longer feel the pain of we've lost a Uganda and the Speaker of Parliament has died, because we are feeling the pain of, hey, how shall we survive? And I think the greatest pain comes from realizing that while some of us are suffering with fuel to cook food, water has been cut. National Water and Sewerage Corporation is cutting people because of bills. We don't have water, we don't have fuel, soap. You talked about sanitary pads, but even if I have a sanitary pad and I can't afford soap, what is my hygiene and sanitation as a woman like? If I go to deliver in hospital and I can't afford soap, what is that like? And I think that the biggest obscenity is that while all of that is happening, individuals who are sycophants and receiving from our public coffers are gaining immensely, okay? And it's in the post-COVID season. So Henry, I think for me, one of the things I always say when I'm on your panel, on your Ebifa Mugwanga platform, State of the Nation address, is to emphasize the importance and urgency of us to reclaim power as citizens, take out Yoweri Museveni and his entire regime, have a systemic review, override the hard drive. The software is dead. There's nothing that can be done. And then redeem our country and bring back life. Talking about the central bank, talking about the fiscal policy, talking about economic recovery, talking about all these Museveni programs is not really useful. The most important starting point is for us to remove the dictatorship, the corrupt, thieving dictatorship from power, and then reclaim power, and then we can heal. You want to talk about sanitary pads. I want to talk about food.
Right.
I want to talk about the night economy. I want to talk about border borders. I want to talk about hawkers. I want to talk about market women. I want to talk about teachers who haven't had a salary. I want to talk about closed schools. I want to talk about the COVID effects on life. I want to talk about young girls selling their sexual services in exchange for food or space or whatever.
Or soap.
And we can't talk about just soap. Soap is the face of a huge interconnected monster. And alongside the soap, remember, there are idiots like the Prime Minister, that fisherwoman, talking about popos.
Leaves.
Kudula. In Luganda, we have, I don't know how you translate kudula, sarcasm. Very ironical, referring to things. If indeed it's true, she said it, because I understand she denied the quote. But I think that failure of those in management who would have advised Yoweri Museveni to even think with heads that work for Ugandans, work with Ugandans, because we can't retrogress back to using purple leaves, right? And so in this technology-driven era, I think the most important thing is for us to just throw out Museveni and his establishment, throw out the entirety of NRM. There's nothing to talk about recovery or healing or getting over. And that's my opinion as a non-economist. Thank you very much, Henry.
We are delighted to have you, and we do respect all opinions at the State of the Nation. Of course, we shall continue to interrogate the economic issues as we also bring in the other issues, the political issues, the social issues, the cultural issues. The irony in Dr. Stella's submission is that she's putting on black, which symbolizes mourning, and while dismissing the mourning process. May I invite Susan Nambata, an economist, to put some light on the economic issues that Mr. Seguya Hillary was pointing out earlier in his submission. Madam Namata.
Thank you so much, Henry. Hello, Dr. Stella. Thanks for coming in. Okay, so as we all know, the economic markets are driven by supply and demand. So that's the basic rule. It's the basic law. So talking about who is responsible for the rise in prices of the commodities, we shouldn't sideline the fact. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, proceed.
We shouldn't sideline the factor, the factor of supply and demand. It's the main factor. It's the main player in all this. So where am I coming in? I'm talking about the government domestic borrowing and expenditure that we all know, and they also know. They know it's one of the most important things that drive that drive the nation Uganda into inflation. For example, in times of government domestic borrowing, for example, in times of elections, the presidential and parliamentary elections, government borrows money, which is spent aimlessly on non-productive things, on non-productive ventures. These in turn bring up these problems we are facing right now. For example, the last election, the government brought in a Myoga venture. I think you've all heard of it. It was packaged as a venture or a fund to help people owning a business, small-scale businesses and entrepreneurs, to help them uplift their businesses. But the fact was, or the reality was, that the Myoga funds was a reward to NRM cadres for mobilizing for votes. That is a fact. So when government borrows this money and spends it aimlessly on these non-productive ventures, the citizenry has to suffer in the end, because the citizenry has to pay back this money with interest. That's why you see these things coming in, that the hike in fuel prices, it was concocted. We all know it's not about Russia and Ukraine. It came way back before even the war. I don't think we just smelt the war and then the fuel started going high. Because we smelt Russia is going to war, then the fuel prices went high. No, it all started way back before the war. Why? Because the government wants to pull back the resources from the poor man. So they concocted, they said they put a fee, an increment, a fee on COVID tests on these truck drivers. So the drivers demonstrated. When they demonstrated, we saw the effect. We saw the effect. It created a scarcity in supply of fuel. So when it created this scarcity, the fuel prices had to hike up automatically. Reason being, we don't even have fuel reservoirs. We can't contain a scarcity of 2 days, not even saying a week. So they concocted a script telling us in two months the prices are going to come back, but no, they're instead going up again. And the war in Ukraine and Russia is making it even worse. So I'm talking about the point of government domestic borrowing and government spending. So I think the government knows, that the economists know, but they don't implement these policies. They don't check the spending. What is government doing with a parliament of 500 legislators? What are they legislating? Now, sorry to say this, we are mourning the death of our speaker, the late Honorable Jacob Olanya, may he so rest in peace. But you're going to see an expenditure like no other. Flying him out to the hospital was one case. Bringing him back is going to be another. Then the state barrier is going to be, I don't want to call it a show, but going to see expenditure, a lot of spending. But where is that money coming from? And then the supply chain, as an economics, the economists always talk about it, it's the supply chain constraints. That one causes inflation nationwide and internationally. How? This causes a hike in prices of commodities because there is what we call speculation effect. How is it? How does it come in? The oligarchy, the little few that own money, They get speculators. They tell them that in such and such a period of time, this thing is going to happen. So what we have to do, because they have idle money sleeping around, they don't know where to invest it. What we have to do is to go buy, for example, let me say sugar, go buy that sugar from that factory, keep it in the warehouses, wait for the prices to hike, then bring it to the market and sell. They hoard the product, then bring them back when people are suffering, and they sell them expensively to get more profits. They are already rich because it's the oligarchy, the rich few that have that idle money to do that. They exploit Ugandans. And these things, we see them happening every now and then. And the consumers can't be protected under the consumer protection law. Why? Because the people supposed to draw these policies to protect the consumers are the same people who are doing these same things.
Benefiting
so there
from
no, Yeah, so I go back to Dr. Stella's motion of suspending this government and every establishment of it. That's when we shall get rid of all these problems we are facing. Then we have finished this.
Yeah.
The escalating fuel prices, I've talked about it. Then we have the depletion of Uganda's foreign currency reserves. Uganda as a country doesn't have, or if the central bank has foreign reserves, they are little. And it's the government's foreign reserves that regulate the monetary policy, that regulate the money flow in the country. So if you don't have enough foreign reserves, you're not going to do anything. It's the waves that are going to dictate the economy, the market. So that's where we are. The foreign reserves are owned by individuals, the oligarchy still. The foreign reserves are supposed to be owned by the mines, the gold, which can help us to improve the foreign reserves, is owned by individuals, the oligarchy. So if the government refuses or deliberately refuses to come in to own the gold mines, to own everything, then how are we going to uplift? How are we going to improve the foreign reserves of the central bank? We shall be hit by everything that comes in. That's my submission, Henry. Thank you.
Mr. Seguya, what are your thoughts, especially given the examples that have already been cited, both by Nemata and Dr. Stella, but especially how this tax, the inflation tax that you talked about, evolves and gets implemented within our economies, especially in Uganda. Are we going to avoid the Zimbabwe inflation situation that they had a few years ago?
Well, thank you. The two guest speakers have made very powerful, comments. And Dr. Stella Nyanzi, I like your shirt. Ugandan lives matter. I agree with you. We have to fight for lives of all Ugandans, as I said in the beginning. Whether children, youth, the old, those that are straight or those that are gay, we have to fight for every person to make sure that, of course, every person enjoys life, liberty, freedom, and justice. So, Dr. Stella Nyanzi made a very good point about changing the entire system, because she was saying that the software is dead. So we need to remove that software and change everything. So I think that would be the best thing, of course, to do to make sure that we fix the mess Despot Museveni has created for the last 37 years. And Susan was also talking about the issue that happened, in recently, because the Prime Minister Robin Nabbanja was coming out to say that the problem with the hiked prices of fuel was because of the COVID restrictions at the border. So she was blaming, in other words, the transporters or the trailer drivers that was supposed to bring in this fuel from Kenya to Uganda. But now it proves the point that she was lying. So we have a junta that is, full of inept and pathological liars. They will just come on national television and lie to us. So if she was saying that, these drivers should be, given easy passes at the border. It was, implemented. So why is it that, today a liter of petrol is going as high as 8,000? They cannot explain. It's because we have a government that is anti-people. So they are not concerned about us. And that's why we have to rise up and remove this guy from power as soon as possible. Susan was also saying that the issue of Ukraine crisis and Russia does not have a bigger impact in terms of the inflation we have. I will somehow disagree with her because you know that, as we said earlier, that these two countries, Ukraine and Russia, they are the largest producer of wheat and the largest suppliers of wheat in the entire world. So if you look at countries like, ours in Africa, mainly North Africa, and maybe also East Africa, we've been depending on their wheat. So the people that Stella Nyanza was talking about that are earning, low income earners that are making the commandos or chapatis, they are going to run out of business because a packet of wheat flour is now becoming expensive. They cannot afford to buy it. So if someone was also, transporting their food produce from, let's say, Kabale to Kampala and Nakasero market, it's going to become very expensive. So let's say they were paying the truck about 350,000. So the price is almost going to double. They'll be paying like 600,000, and in the end, they'll be not making profits. So it goes back also to the issue of these middlemen in Uganda, because we have a group of Ugandans who are selfish and they're holding these commodities in our market. So you saw what happened years ago in 2011 with Kahiro Tafile. He made himself the only supplier of sugar in the country. So if we don't have other suppliers, of course, if one person is supplying to all corners of the country, then it means we are giving a lot of power to that person to determine the price of that commodity. But if we have options, then it means that the prices will be going low. But because this junta is not concerned, and it is these guys who are owning these businesses, so they can predict, they can use economists who are in the system to foretell these circumstances that now we see Russia is going to is invading Ukraine. So we anticipate that in 2 weeks there will be scarcity of resources. So let's hide these items, and once this thing becomes to play, then we bring out these items at very high prices. So the government is nowhere to be seen. We don't see the government appearing to come as a substitute to the challenges Ugandans are facing. So look at sectors like transport. If we had a government that invested in the transport sector, and these taxis are very expensive. Let's say someone is traveling from Kampala to Bondibujo or to Masaka, and they're paying a very high price. The government will come up with a plan B that our buses, they are cheaper. So you're paying a quarter or a half of what the other guys will be charging. So it will be forcing the other private sector to also lower the prices to make sure that consumers are not overcharged. But we don't have a working system. So the entire system is dead. And that is what we call dystopia. But to Museveni, for him, I doubt if he even knows what is going on, because he doesn't care. For him, he has the money to spend. And his Triangular Dynasty, the 1%, they have the money to spend. So they cannot feel the pain of the Wananchi, because we're talking about, Stella, she was talking about the sanitary pads. But how many girls can afford the cost of sanitary pads? So how many girls are going to miss out school simply because they're in their monthly periods? Of course, very many of them. So how many children are going to miss out of school? Or how many children are going to go to school on empty stomachs because they have no food? This government is spending literally like $1 on each primary child who is on UPE schools program. So we're in a crisis, an economic crisis, and it is unfortunate that it is in a debt economy. So Uganda is, we just need to buckle up as concerned citizens. We need to buckle up and fight back. Otherwise, it is about survival for the fittest. Nobody's going to fight for us except ourselves. So I don't know, but let's keep fighting. Otherwise, The worst is yet to come.
Dr. Stella, your thoughts?
Right. So I want to just pick on 3 quick points that arose in response to the previous speakers. So Ukraine and Russia. When Afghanistan had an urgent need to evacuate its citizens, what did Uganda do? We tagged a price to each refugee and welcomed them and put them up in plush hotels in Entebbe. And up to today, we know nothing has happened, right? One of the things I see dictator Museveni and his thieves doing is taking advantage of the Russia-Ukrainian situation and overburdening an already overburdened, overpopulated Uganda by strategically offering ourselves as a country that will host Ukrainians. Unfortunately, because of racism, Uganda may not be an option for white-blooded, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Ukrainian Europeans. But if Yoweri Museveni could take advantage of this opportunity, that is how milky they are. They're milking every opportunity, whether it's local, regional, or international. I think that indeed the questions around, wheat and oil are important because Russia and Ukraine are suppliers of the world, the wheat basket, or so we are told. But I think for us that Museveni is not looking at that equation and how it impacts Uganda. He's going to try with his spin economists. So we have economists who have studied economics, right, and specialized in the discipline of controlling economies. And I think we have a clear division between oppressed economists and those who are working with the oppressor. And just to tie into what Hillary said, that Museveni has a gang of thieving economists who can say to him, there's an opportunity, offer Uganda as a space to house and shelter refugees. If he could do that, that is how exploitative he is. He's looking for another opportunity to milk more money, not for Ugandans, sadly, because we don't know where the money that's coming in from the US for Afghanistan refugees is going. There's no accountability for it. We don't know how long we are housing these people. But I think what I'm trying to say is that rather than look at macro world economics in relation to how Uganda is affected, how everyday Ugandans are affected, I think that the Museveni oligocracy looks at opportunities. What's the next one? Where's the next place to steal? Where the hyenas just waiting, to steal, and they're stealing not only from insiders but also outsiders. That's the first point I wanted to make in response. I think the second point for me arises from the issue of this widening gap between specialists, technocrats, educated people, intelligentsia, the academy, okay? That pre-Museveni days, it was useful, important to go and get an education. A lot of our parents invested a lot of money to educate our generation now. I'm 40, some of you guys are 30. Maybe Henry's 20, I don't know. But our generation, education meant a lot because when one invested, we knew that there was a hope always that one would use their privilege as an educated class to work for the underprivileged, usually through public service. And when private enterprise came in, it wasn't initially to benefit the wealthy few in power, but it was to work and enhance the public services. What has happened under the Yoweri Museveni dictatorship, however, sadly, is that we have a class of educated thieves who are working to entrench and further steal together with the oppressor. And so questions of statistics, questions of economic reports, questions of all these things that come in have become questionable, that everyday academics and people of goodwill and intellect have been reduced to speculating and wondering, are these doctored statistics or are they real? I've been to conferences where academic scholars, analysts are questioning not the conclusions, but the data sources and what spin has been introduced into Ugandan data, Uganda along with Nigeria and a few other dodgy countries. And so very quickly, the knowledge that should have been working for Ugandans coming from Ugandan experts is quickly getting tainted and corrupted and questionable and dubious, right? And I think for me, again, it's a governance issue. Until we address the executive messing with the technocrats, we are doomed. It doesn't matter how many effective policies we have, we are doomed. And the very last issue I wanted to highlight came around all these discussions about inflation and deflation and all of that. I think, again, related to governance, the executive every budget year introduces a supplementary budget, which almost never goes questioned by our parliamentarians. And I think what that for me is about Yoweri Museveni again as a rapist, raping the manhood of our parliament. Parliament yafe agisalako obusajja be pwa tebalina bigege. You know, that our parliament has been reduced to yes man, rubber stamps, bum leakers, etc. I don't apologize for my graphic language, because if I had a more exact language, I would use it. What am I saying? I'm saying, Henry, that perhaps Parliament was created to check the excesses of the executive. That when the oligarchs or the rich middle broker, brokers, broker mu Uganda, broker mu Luzungu, brokers, the wealth brokers of Uganda, the small class of middlemen, that perhaps we would have had legislators and a legislation, a body of law that can regulate what's happening. However, the executive is always interfering to the point that our parliament has been emasculated to the point of being ineffective. I'm making a point there. I'm not just being obscene. And it is so bad. You know, I've given the example of the annual supplementary budget. You know, there's the defense budget. I think either Susan or someone else mentioned that, or maybe one of the everyday Ugandans who wrote and said, I don't understand the figures, but I know we spend heavy on defense.
UPDF, that was Mr. James Muge.
Yes, I think I saw that there. And I think for me, just a rejoinder to say, why do we prioritize UPDF and SFC and Amazon, you know, Somalia and Congo and all those foreign excavations? It's because our executive issues an order from above. And in terms of budgeting and budgeting priorities, health, education, now food and transport become total, they go to the very bottom. And yet those are the things that assumingly made votes for Yoweri Museveni. So again, the point I'm making for me is it is largely about an executive that interferes. And lastly, on the same point, part C or part B, that the executive also interferes with the judiciary, because perhaps we would have gone after the thieves, gone after the middlemen, gone after those who have offshore accounts here in Germany and Switzerland and God knows where else. But the justice system is not working. It has been rendered impotent as well. Temuli busajja okwatakwatako tewali kiri tebapika justice terina maanyi teyima. And so that failure for me is acute, because maybe if the laws are weak and parliament is weak and the executive is overbearing, perhaps we'd have a justice system that checks these excesses and vices of Uganda's planners. However, the justice system has been corrupted as well and rendered inefficient. And so again, Henry, for me, the economics issues very similar to the budgetary issues, very similar to the fiscal and monetary, and even household incomes and household spending stem from the rot comes from the head. It is not an empty, cliched proverb. It's very powerful. If we don't deal with the executive, we are peeing in the wind.
Oh my goodness. Susan, your response to that, and then I'll ask Mr. Seguya, how do we respond to that? How do we re-energize the potence of the structures we have in Uganda? How do we excite those the manhood, as as Dr. Stella would say? Susan.
Just to go back to Hillary's submission, he said, he disagreed with me saying Russia and Ukraine are not going, that the war is not going to affect the economy. It's going to affect the economies of every country in the world. I was just saying that inflation in Uganda had already started even before the war between Russia and Ukraine. So them coming out singing, it's Russia and Ukraine, it's Russia and Ukraine. No, they are lying to us. The problems had already started. And they failed to go back to the cause, to the roots of the problem and explain expoundingly to Ugandans that this and this. Up until now, we don't know why the fuel prices went up and are not coming back down. As we speak, we don't know the reasons. All we know is that the trucks, the trucks, when the trucks stagnated at the border, they demonstrated and then it hiked. But that's not the explanation. They know the truth. So going on to the inflation topic, it's going to take us all time talking about it. In Uganda, for example, we are still talking about Uganda. We had a problem of the multinational companies exited. They went off. They exited Uganda. So all these are creating a supply hiccup. They are creating a supply hiccup in the economy. For example, ShopRite could bridge the gap. They could import directly from South Africa, and then we could get some items at a very lower price. But now ShopRite is no more. We no longer have Nakumat. It used to bridge the gap still. They used to import directly from Kenya, and we could buy on a lower price. Now the economy is in the hands of the hyenas, the ones who want to let me even ask, why are we not having a governor, Bank of Uganda right now? Why? In these economic hard times. We should be having a mechanism that helps us mitigate, that helps us control. We should have a mechanism that bank control or manage the commercial banks, but we don't have a Bank of Uganda governor. We should get one. The government should make plans, or the president, I don't know if he's sleeping or what, he should make plans. I don't know if he doesn't see a better person fit, but we have people fit for that job. We have professors, we have land professors, but maybe they are not fit for him because he sees they're not going to work under his supervision, I should say.
Some people might say that since there is already a deputy governor, since there is already a board of directors within the establishment, the Bank of Uganda establishment, then business is stable because as a functional institution that has all these structures, with or without the governor, things are going to work smoothly. I don't know. That's some of the speculations. Plus, the law is really silent about when a governor should be appointed. So I don't know. But I think that's a legitimate question that should be interrogated.
Yes, but in some countries which are serious about their economies, the governor gets sick in just a day, and you will see the stocks or the currencies shift. The prices will shift. So I wouldn't say that some people, of course, will come and argue that maybe our systems are so strong. That's why even if the governor died, we never saw a hiccup in the dollar rate. But it's starting to deplete. So it's not the issue. The issue is the governor was working, but not working in reality. The governor was there, but in reality, the waves in Uganda's economy are just dictated by external forces, I might say. He wasn't at job, though he was working. So that's it, Henry.
All right. Here, you want to respond?
Yes, sure. I again thank Susan and Dr. Stella Nyanzi for the submissions they've made. And because you were telling me like, so how can we even move on from this economic crisis that we're facing today?
Yeah.
And one thing I want us to first of all agree on is that we have a global inflation. So inflation is everywhere right now, and the issue of Ukraine and Russia has caused this global inflation. So even here in America, where I'm based, of course, we are feeling the price of gas, because right now 1 gallon of gas is at almost $5. In other states, it's even over $5. So it's the same thing. It's because of, again, the disruption in the supply chain, because America was getting, of course, this oil from, Russia mainly, because they were importing thousands of barrels of oil from Russia, but because of what's going on and the anti-Putin today, they cannot import that abundance of oil from Russia. So they are resorting to going to other countries where they were fighting dictators. So it is fascinating for America to go back to Venezuela, and they agree with the dictator Maduro they were fighting against.
Right.
So they are saying that now we are supporting Juan Guaido, who was running against Maduro, and America was recognizing Juan Guaido. But today they've put Juan Guaido aside, and they are in negotiations with Maduro to supply them with oil. So that's the hypocrisy of this international community. Today they show you that they are standing with you, but tomorrow, because of their selfish interests, they will say we are done with you. That's why they say, America does not have a permanent enemy, but it has a permanent interest. So as Ugandans, we have to be extremely careful the way we deal with the international community when it comes to the challenges or the issues that concern our economies. Now, how do we move on? Even the government of Uganda, of course, they know these economic strategies, because one, it is the issue of import substitution. So if we had a working government, of course, they would have remedies. So import substitution means that you're going to, stop importing certain number of goods from maybe China, from India, and start manufacturing them in your country, Uganda. But today, of course, the government has failed to invest in indigenous investors to make sure that they can produce these goods, and we stop depending on these, foreign countries. So when the disruptions in supply chains, of course, comes up, it is us Ugandans who are going to get affected. So maybe if we get rid of this government, as Dr. Selanyans was suggesting, and Susan, we change that software. So the new coming government should prioritize the issue of import substitution to make sure that also we become a self-dependent country, not depending a lot on other countries. So since we are going to start producing oil, we should now rethink, are we going to allow these companies who've given oil deals to take away the crude oil, or we can tell them, let's have...
You keep saying we. You keep saying we about regarding the oil, but they told us, someone said that was their oil, his oil.
Of course, that's what Museveni can use, that rhetoric, that my oil, and it's even the Sun has coped up with his arrogance, because recently Mohoz was saying my army. So if they think national, resources are theirs, but they don't own them. So very soon, of course, Despot Museveni will go on, and Ugandans will reclaim these properties, or these resources. So we cannot allow such ridiculous, rhetoric to go on as Ugandans that are concerned. So we shall of course resist that. So the other issue, of course, has to come to the parliament. So the legislature, we know it's inept, it is dysfunctional. But again, if we are to have a parliament that works in interest of people, this parliament would be able to come up with what we call the Commodity Act. So this Commodity Act will be able to regulate prices in the market. So let's say on the issue of maybe a bar of soap. So if we had this Commodity Act, the parliament will come out and say, you know what, the bar of soap cannot go beyond 6,000 or 5,000. So they call upon the actors in this business environment. So they call upon the private sector, they call upon the manufacturers, and they discuss what are the costs of production, what are the costs of transportation. Okay, now if we know all these costs, then what will be the cost of the retailer? So at what cost are you going to put this product at the retailer? And at what cost can the retailer also sell it to the final consumer, so that we don't overcharge the consumers or the Ugandans? So there will be, in other words, protecting we the wananchi.
How does that affect the principles of capitalism?
Well, of course, capitalism does not mean to exploit someone. It means, yes, come up with an idea, then make sure that you benefit from the idea. But the idea should not mean that you're going to, exploit someone to the core. So you have to bring in the element of human rights. Food is a human right. So you cannot say that you're going to hike prices and Ugandans die of hunger. No, that has to come into consideration. So the other issue, of course, is about the change of lifestyles. So as Ugandans, because right now we have no alternatives. So it is about us to rethink on how we change or adjust our lifestyles. So most Ugandans, of course, are going to start having 1 meal a day in order to survive. So someone who was having a commando of 2,000, and today it's very hard, of course, to buy a commando of 1,000 or 2,000. Now you have to rethink: am I going to buy maybe to eat one toast of bread and water, then I survive? How am I? So we have to come up with alternatives, maybe in terms of food security, because years ago we used to have granaries, but today that culture has been, erased by our leaders. So it is time for leaders to remind Ugandans that let's prepare for these hard times, because they are inevitable and they will never stop. Because with what's going on in the world today, we are living in a complex world. So it's all about doing the right thing, because Uganda also messed up. If you look at the vote at the UN Security Council, Uganda voted against Uganda abstained
yes.
that resolution of the UN. Yeah. But of course, abstention, it means that you're siding with dictator Vladimir Putin. Because if the entire world is saying that we have to condemn the aggression of Russia, the invasion of Russia, and Putin is saying, you know what, I'm coming to save people from a genocide. We're not seeing a genocide. We are seeing dictator Putin killing innocent Ukrainians. Ukraine, the sovereign country with well-demarcated territories that Russia has to, respect. So we cannot support this issue of, people bring up other things that, America also invaded Iraq, invaded Afghanistan, so it gives Russia a go-ahead. No, we have to come out and say whatever happened in the past does not justify the actions that Russia is taking today. So it is time for Russia to make sure it withdraws its military from the territories or the sovereign country of Ukraine, and also withdraw its military equipment to make sure that we bring back the world to normal. Because if this war goes on, our suffering is going on. For us today, we are lucky that we're in diaspora. At least we can afford to get food. But many Ugandans don't know what's going to happen. Many Ugandans are going to have their businesses closed. They don't know how they'll be even able to pay for school fees for their children the next term. So that becomes a very serious issue. And Susan talks about also the issue of multinational corporations that are leaving the country. So when these MNCs come into Uganda, they bring an inflow of capital. But when they leave, of course, they are leaving with these dollars. And instead of exchanging the money into Ugandan shillings, they're leaving with dollars. So in the end, they are repatriating all the amount of money that will enable our economy to run. They're taking it back to their countries. So at the end of the day, Ugandans are going to be suffering. So we just need to, of course, rethink how we can overcome this. But the biggest solution, of course, is to make sure that we resist this failed leadership of Despot Museveni and his Rwanda dynasty, to make sure that we get a government that is pro-people, not the one that is anti-people.
The conversation about Russia and Ukraine is a complex one. I wonder what you would say to a Russian who thinks that Putin is, quote unquote, protecting their interests, security interests, and they have also been cut out of the financial system when SWIFT was cut through the latest sanctions. That's a conversation you can also interrogate in and see the different dynamics that are happening as we interrogate the issue about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But before we go into that, before heading into that conversation, I think I want to invite Susan to give us some remedies. I think she has also presented a lot of challenges that have happened and what is going on. So I need to know what the remedies are, and then I'll invite Stella to close it up as we close the conversation. Unless of course, unless Hilary wants to revert. Susan.
Yes, thank you, Henry. Okay, so the remedies, the government has many tools of getting solutions to help people out of these problems, but as we are already saying that they don't care, they don't mind, or they are tired, they can no longer think. So they still, we shall talk and talk and talk, but nothing will be done. They know what to do, they know what to be done, but the rate of corruption, the impunity, nothing can be done. Nothing can be done properly to remedy the plight of Ugandans. For example, agriculture. Uganda is best suitable for agriculture. We all know that in sub-Saharan Africa, because of the climate, the warm climate, the ample fertile land, the regular rainfall. So agriculture in Uganda can be yielded. But why is it going down instead? Agriculture used to contribute 37% on the nation GDP years ago, but as for now, it's contributing 23%. It's going down, and yet we have a comparative advantage when it comes to agriculture because of the fertile land, the fertile soil. My question is, why are we putting up things that we can't do best? Why are we going to? I'm not saying we shouldn't go into industrialization. Yes, it's fine, but we have something we can do best. We can do best in agriculture. Why don't we put more efforts there? Because the technology to do industrialization and earn more from it, we don't have it. Because we don't have innovators, we suppress the entrepreneurs. So why don't we uplift the agriculturalists and make sure that the GDP goes up again, make sure we yield more in agriculture more than anything. Now we have a problem of climate change. It's making everything impossible for farmers. They have to irrigate, the seasons are changing. So the government should come in and help out. The government should bring extensive agricultural practices. The government should uplift farmers by bringing back the cooperative unions where the prices could be discussed and set so that the farmer is not discouraged. The government should introduce irrigation schemes at a lower cost so that we uplift agriculture again. As for now, it's the lowest thing contributing to the GDP. We have the service sector contributed highly. Then the service sector is contributing. Then we have what else? Then agriculture comes in third. But the industrial sector comes in second, then agriculture comes in third. I would suggest the government puts policies that uplifts agriculturalists so that we uplift the agriculture sector. Then the second thing I would think of, getting alternatives. So now the fuel prices are high. What alternative do we have? As we all know, we suppress innovators. Uganda doesn't put much money into innovation. But I would think if we put money into innovators, into innovation, we could try and experiment how biofuel could work. And we have an alternative for fuel that could help in the fuel crisis. So that's it.
Right. Dr. Stella. As
so
we
Henry,
wrap up the conversation.
Yes, in 1 minute. Brilliant economists. Clearly, Uganda is not
devoid of thinkers and intelligent people who are critical and know the solutions as they're offered in textbooks, but also from comparative analysis at other countries, other contexts. Susan and Henry are brilliant examples. So our country is not bereft. We are not lacking the intellectual power and willingness and ability of Ugandans to do the hard work that needs to recover our country. However, I want to latch on to points made by both Hillary and Susan to say we must organize resistance. Use the current economic crisis to build the resistance further. For those of us who have already seen reason because of political oppression or corruption or whatever to be part of the liberation struggle in Uganda, another opportunity has offered itself with the high prices, the high cost of living, the hunger, the plight, and the misery, but also the losses that the wealthier middle class of merchants is experiencing today. Every merchant, trader, banker, corporate, whatever, salary earners even are going to get hit if they're not already hit by the current financial economic crisis. And I think that it's a moment those of us in the liberation struggle must seize to say the hunger is mutual. Join the liberation struggle. All these ideas are brilliant. I've written multinational corporations. All this language is amazing, but we can do nothing in a dead system. So let us first deal with the enemy, get him out of our country, and then we clean up. That is what I reiterate. It doesn't matter how many good working policies we have. You can't treat a corpse. Mulambo gutiggatiga, mulambo gufudde baguziikolanya kitalo nnyo, tufune omusika omupya tukole naye. Thank you very much, Henry, for the week.
Thank you so much again. Hillary, do you want to wrap up? You seem like you have something to say.
I'll echo on what Dr. Stella Nyanza said. I think she makes a very imperative point that we need to organize ourselves and resist this junta of Despot Museveni. And also to what Susan has been raising and us, I think for now Ugandans just need short-term solutions to the inflation that we're facing, because most of the remedies we've been given, they are long-term. But a Ugandan who is in Kabaro, in Iganga, in Masaka, or in Gulu, they want to see what short-term remedies can our government officials make to make sure that, of course, they get out of this economic crisis. So that's why I was also insisting that the parliament should come up with the Commodity Act to make sure that it protects the consumers from this exploitation, because it will be regulating the price on most of the basic commodities like soap, milk, or fuel. And the other thing, of course, it will be helping us to get rid of these middlemen, because in most cases it is the middlemen that are causing this anarchy. So we should, just put pressure on our local leaders. So if you have local leaders or if you have parliamentarians, make sure that you give them calls. Make sure that you text them, check them out on their social media platforms. Make sure you put enough pressure on them to prioritize this issue, because it's so sad that the Speaker of Parliament and the Deputy Speaker, they were out of Parliament, and they cannot debate about this serious issue. So they've left us in suspense. Now you wonder what kind of direction we're taking. So it shows Uganda is on crossroads, because the leaders do not care. So you cannot, how can you even tell someone that today the Deputy Speaker and the Speaker of Parliament, they've been out of Uganda? So who was chairing the Parliament? Was Parliament on break? How can Parliament be on break in such economic crisis? So it means they don't care about we, the people of Uganda, who took them to power. So we have to vote them out, because they are inept and they failed to save us from this economic crisis. Otherwise, I'm so honored to meet Dr. Stella Nyanzi and Susan Namata, via the digital space. Probably one time I'll meet them in person also, and make sure that, of course, we amplify our message to liberate ourselves from this captivity of Despot Museveni.
We shall have a simple chat when I close this. So stay in the studio, and then we shall engage a little bit more when we are done live. But I want to thank each and every one of you for participating in these conversations. this is the least we could do. Talk about the issues that are affecting our people on a daily basis in Uganda. Engage in these conversations, try to educate, and also learn from each other. I want to thank all of you for participating in these conversations, but I want to thank mainly the people who sit in their who stay in their sitting rooms and watch us via phones, via computers, via some of you even project us on your TVs and watch us via there. The people who follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, those who share these conversations with your friends. Thank you so much for following us. Thank you so much for listening in. Thanks to the people who comment and ask questions. It is a pleasure to serve you. It is a pleasure to have these conversations with you. We hope that you gain and benefit from these conversations. Many questions are always being asked. Of course, Hillary has posed a challenge to the parliamentarians, the legislature. When are you going to think about starting a Commodities Act and implement it? If you really think you're representing the people of Uganda, do you think you're doing more when such a crisis comes by and finds you silent and you continue to be silent? I think the next item in Parliament now is going to be mourning the Right Honorable Speaker who passed on. Of course, as a people, we commensurate with the families, the family members, the friends of Honorable Lanya as a person, as a politician. That's a different interrogation that should be engaged in. But as a person, we commensurate with you, with the people, the family that have lost a loved one. I've been reliably informed that he did not want to come to the US. He really wanted to stay with his family. But of course, because of the political dynamics, the people who have the power could not let him stay with his family. So those family members that have missed out on seeing him in his last days, we do commiserate with you. We hope that the memories you made with him will comfort you and in these difficult times. As a politician, that's a different conversation. But at the state of the nation, that is the conversations. Thank you so much for following us, and thank you so much for engaging in these conversations. Have a great Sunday. This is the state of the nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Sally.